We are back this week with a fabulous author, Rebecca Roanhorse. Is that how I say it?
Yeah, that's how you say it.
Okay, great.
Hi,
I don't know why I was like I may be misparsing this somehow in my brain. I'm not sure why I was. Anyway, but Rebecca is awesome and just won a Nebula Award for her story called Your Authentic Indian Experience TM. And that is a powerful story. And she has a novel. Is it out?
It's out in a week from today, June 26th.
Week from today. So you are all going to be in for a treat because all the things I hear about this book are amazing. So hopefully what we can do is we can talk a bit about the book and get a little insight from Rebecca and have a lot of fun. So welcome, Rebecca. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's see. The book is called Trail of Lightning.
Right. I have a copy.
Show it off.
There it is. Well, this is the arc, but yes, that's the book. Trail of Lightning.
Great. That's beautiful art. So why don't you tell us a bit about it? I know it's a post-apocalyptic story.
Right. And the elevator pitch was an indigenous Mad Max Fury Road. And that's because it's apocalyptic. It's really a fast-paced, sort of exciting adventure through Navajo country after a climate apocalypse. And so after the climate apocalypse, the Navajo Nation's doing pretty good, the Navajo Reservation. Actually, they're one of the better places to be. But the gods and the monsters and the heroes of legend have risen up and walked the land.
Nice.
Yeah, and so our story follows the protagonist, Maggie Hosky, and she is a monster hunter. And so she hunts monsters in a post-apocalyptic nation.
Nice. That is really cool. So
added to my must-read list right now. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
I've got it pre-ordered for 6 months.
Yep. So it's just it sounds fabulous. So when I always like to ask my authors sort of where was this concept initially born in your brain or in your research or wherever? Where did you find this idea that came together to become Trail of Lightning?
Yeah. Well, I'm a DC fan, and since sort of its boom in the 90s, but I never found a book that had the indigenous representation that I wanted. I wanted to read a story where all the gods and the heroes and everyone, were set in an indigenous North America mythology. Mm-hmm. And instead of getting the Irish or the Scandinavian or, whatever it was that you always see, I wanted something that was in North America. It's such a rich history and culture and even like living. I didn't see why people weren't writing from it. I wanted to do that. And I also wanted to create a protagonist native that was indigenous. Mm-hmm. And I'd read a lot of urban fantasy where you had indigenous main characters, but they were half. They were often like half they didn't know. They were often out of touch with their culture and that sort of thing. Do that. I wanted to create a main character that was very grounded in her culture, that it took place on the reservation, that this was clearly a native story, but it had all the tropes and all sort of the fun of urban fantasy.
Cool.
And then post-apocalyptic just felt natural. We're headed there anyway with climate change and with the energy wars and the sort of things that that characterize my story. I felt like that's, if I were going to look into the near future, this is sort of what I would see.
Okay.
And then times 10. Yeah.
Sure. Because always times 10.
Yeah, right. Because times 1 is boring.
mean, you can make it interesting, but times 10 is way more fun. Okay, cool. Great stuff. So, would you like to take a minute to tell us about specific mythologies that you're referencing?
Sure. Okay, so it's Navajo, and I kept it very Navajo, but I was trying to be very careful about the stories that I chose. Like in a lot of indigenous cultures, not all the stories are for public consumption.
Right.
Like I'm actually Pueblo, I'm from Okewenge, which is a small tribe just north of Santa Fe, where I am. And we don't share a lot of stories with outsiders because of the history of exploitation and genocide and things. A lot of those stories aren't meant to be shared. But Navajo is huge. It's a huge tribe. It's got 50,000 members. It takes up the Four Corners area, so it touches on Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona. And a lot of their stories are already sort of out in the public consciousness. And there's a lot of Navajo creators who are already working with their stories. So I tried to pick mythology stories that I had seen others already working with, like the Hero Twins. So one of the sort of grounding stories in my book is the story of the Hero Twins. And they were originally monster slayers. And so they were born into the world by Changing Woman, who's sort of the primary Navajo deity, to rid the world of monsters could live there. One of the brothers, there's two brothers, they're brothers Navajo way, so I think brothers Navajo way, let's say. And one of them is Naye'inizgani, main monster slayer. And he appears in my book. He is my main character's mentor.
Okay. You know what? May I ask you a question? Do you have a chat bar that you can access? Mm-hmm. There should be one up in the upper left corner on the left on the top menu, because I would love to see spellings for all of these wonderful names that I don't know how to spell.
I think. Oh yeah. Well, I see Cliff has said some things. Chat message or link?
Yeah. So you can just type in there.
Let's see. That says hello.
Yes, it does. Well done.
Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I think you had put in a couple of names for the Hero Twins, and I was feeling like I couldn't write them down in my notes, and it's gonna make it harder for me to report on them later if I don't know how to spell them. I'm gonna have to come back to you and say, how do I spell this?
Oh gosh, you know, and I don't have a Navajo friendly keyboard, so there's a lot of there's a lot of what do you call them? That I can't write for you, but I'm happy to.
So let me ask you then: are these names appearing with using a Navajo friendly keyboard in your book?
Yes.
Yay! Okay,
yes,
that's cool.
Yeah, the publisher actually went the extra mile, and there are a lot of Navajo words in the book that are not translated. We left them as they were, and we used Navajo font, and and I had actually a friend who's fluent, who's a native speaker and is fluent, that made sure I got all my words right. So you can learn a little Navajo too as you read the book.
I just sighed deeply in satisfaction. Because that's awesome that you don't have to translate it. And no one said, you have to do this.
Yeah.
That's great.
So this is, this is like an extra added resource for people like me who are linguistics geeks to want to read the book, because I want to see all the words. Fabulous.
And there will be an audiobook, and it's kind of neat. We are going to have an Indigenous narrator and a pronunciation guide for all the Navajo words. So
Wow.
she should get them right. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
That is so necessary too.
Yes, it's so important.
Because like it's only been 500 years. We should probably learn how to speak that. And I'm just saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
and it's a beautiful language. Yeah. So it's really neat to be able to
do you
incorporate.
speak any of it yourself, Rebecca? Have you learned any of it in this process?
Yeah, I lived on the Navajo reservation for a couple of years.
Okay.
In Navajo. And so when I was living there, I was much better than I am now. I've never been fluent, but at least, you know, I worked with a population often that didn't speak English. They were often older, elder, and a lot of them didn't speak. So it's like you. Language revive. So there are a lot of signs in Navajo. There are a lot of places you go. You know, the instructions are in Navajo. So the language is much more alive, and you're surrounded by it a lot more than you might think you would be if you've never been there.
Sure.
Yeah. And both my in-laws are speakers, and you know, I often sit in a room surrounded by Navajo folks telling like Bigfoot stories, which is like one of my favorites. But I have no idea what they're saying. The Navajo and good parts. So, yeah.
That's really cool, though.
Yeah, now I want to hear those too.
The Bigfoot stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of indigenous people have Bigfoots.
So, I don't know if it's my connection or your connection, Rebecca. Is everybody hearing Rebecca well?
No.
I'm having some picket fencing. It comes in and out a little.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No.
Same thing.
Well,
Should I try that?
you can if you'd like. I'm not sure whether that is going to be the magic solution to the particular problem we're having. This is one of the hazards of working with free technology.
I think I just lost everybody.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, no, there you are. But yeah, there you are.
Okay. Well, I mean, we just forge ahead, I guess. It's working on free Google software is great, but has its occasional drawbacks. So I guess we just see how we go.
Okay.
Well, so I'm intrigued to hear about monsters, given that we have monster hunters in the story. Can you tell us a bit about those?
You know, I'm going to keep the monsters a little bit of a secret.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
It's figuring out who, you know, what the monster is and who made it and, you know, why it's there and that sort of thing.
Okay.
But you do get some.
That monsters are spoilery. It's good though. I like the idea of monsters being spoilery. So, did you have a significant research process as you were putting this book together?
Yes and no. You know, it's the culture. You know, had I moved here yet? Well, it was the culture I live in. You know, so it was. I asked for stories. You know, I had people share the stories that they knew with me. And I did do some research. There's a great book. Hold on, this is the great thing about being near your bookshelf. This book, the Dene Bahane. This is the Navajo creation story. By this guy. And this was a great reference that I used as sort of a stand. Like this was actually a Belagana guy. So Belagana is just like a white guy in Navajo, and you'll see that a lot in my book. Who gathered, you know, sort of versions, different the emergent stories, and then the hero twin stories, and some of the other stories. And I guess for his dissertation or other research. And, you know, he sort of interpreted them poetically. And so this is I found this to be a great resource. When I wanted to find sort of common language for some of the stories, because the stories, of course, vary from area to area. The reservation is huge. And so the northwest corner will have a different version of the same story, you know, than people in like the southeast corner.
Yeah.
So I tried to find the one that was most common, you know, the one that I found in books like that, and go with that.
Makes sense. And what about the aspects of the post-apocalypse that you were using? Was that something that you did research on, or was it something that you felt pretty confident with the things that you had experienced up to this point?
You know, my post-apocalyptic vision, I think, comes a lot from the no Apple protests in the last year in the Dakotas, and just sort of the pipeline wars. Well, I call them the pipeline wars now, so now they're like the pipeline wars in my head. But the things that are going on with these energy pipelines through tribal land now as we speak, you know, and the infringement onto tribal land that we see in places like Bear Ears monuments and things like that, and even now what's going on with Trump and trying, you know, he was sort of to change the status of tribal land, you know, to move it out of trust. Right now it's in trust to the federal government.
Yeah.
You know, you can't, it's not fee land, you can't sell it. And you know, so there's been a push that seems to have lost steam, but who knows, to move that into some sort of like fee land where then it can be alienated from the tribe. And we've been through that in history. We've seen that happen, you know, and lots of tribes have gone to a lot of trouble to try to get their land back. So I would hate to see that, but it was very easy for me to visualize for tribal people would look like, because we've been there. We've seen it before. We know what the dystopian government looks like. So this is it again.
Yep.
So I have a question.
Sure.
You have elements of, I mean, mythology, which would be, you know, marketing-wise considered fantasy, right? And it's set in the future. Was there any pushback from editors to blend what are often seen as two separate genres into one book? And how did you navigate that?
Yes. So I wrote in my mind what is an urban fantasy. I used a lot of the tropes of urban fantasy that you see in Alona Andrews' books and things like that. They are a big influence on what I was writing. But, you know, the common, I guess, line in publishing is that urban fantasy is dead. So I did get some pushback on that. And they're like, well, let's look at this as more of a post-apocalyptic book, because that is a little more marketable than urban fantasy right now. So we sort of packaged it. You know, I left that honestly to the marketing people. Like, I write the book, I'll make it as good as, you know, as I'll do the best job as I can. But you guys are going to have to figure out, you know, what genre it belongs and how you want to market it. And I'm not going to fight people on that. They know the industry better than I do. But yes, there was a push towards making this more of a post-apocalyptic book than an urban fantasy book, because urban fantasy is quote unquote dead.
Huh, that's interesting. I wonder, I mean, it reminds me in some respects of Nnedi Okorafor's work, the way that she will blend the near future with fantasy and particular local mythologies. you know, and I don't honestly don't know. I've never had her on the show, and I would love to, but to ask her, hey, you know, did people give you trouble about genre and what angle to take on this kind of a world? Because it seems like at this point that should be something that people are ready to say, yes, I'm going to dive into this wholeheartedly.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I have had the chance to talk to her a bit, and she's lovely, by the way.
Yes.
And we write sort of similar, you know, I'm not going to compare myself like making waves, but yeah, I think this meshing of genres and bringing in, particularly when you're writing from a culture that doesn't do a lot of distinguishing between the mythological and the scientific, let's say, words with caution. But I mean, there's a lot of Navajo culture, just as I'm sure there's Aryan culture, where you're not really differentiating. You're not, this belongs in this box and this belongs in that box. This is all a mesh within the culture, you know, and so science and fantasy sort of come together in ways, you know, that maybe publishing genres aren't familiar with, but that ring true, I think, to their authors.
Yeah. And it seems to their readers as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, and isn't there a certain tendency in the publishing industry to, I guess, run through a genre before there's been adequate representation from different sorts of storytellers? It's kind of like we're done with this particular genre, but we haven't had anybody but this particular kind of people represented in it.
Right. You may be responsible for the zombie revival of the urban fantasy genre. I don't know. We'll see. It sounds like this is something that people haven't seen, and it's going to be really fresh and wonderful and adventurous. And maybe we'll figure out what to call it later. But okay, am I connecting with you, Rebecca?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So, cool. So, how big is this world that you're working in your view? Is it lots of books?
It is 4 books. 4 is the magic number in Navajo culture. So yeah, no, I always thought of this as a quartet. So yeah, and we've definitely got the second book is done. It's in the hopper and ready to go. Well, hold on, I'm doing copy edits, so it's got a ways to go, but the majority of it is done. The hard part's done.
Cool.
And then I know what's going to happen in the 3rd book, and I have an idea for the 4th book. So yeah, I think this world will take us through 4 books.
That's terrific.
Yeah, very excited.
Can you tell us anything about the future?
The future of my books?
Too hard? I don't know.
Well, I could tell you, this book takes place on the Navajo reservation. They never leave. But they do. I call it my post-apocalyptic girl gang road trip down Route 66. So in book 2, we leave the confines of the reservation and we head down Route 66 through what is left of Arizona. And that's a little more, I guess, traditionally apocalyptic. But it's a lot of fun. One of the things to do in this series in general is visit sort of the tropes and the ideas that you might be familiar with already, but then give them an indigenous flair, something that feels familiar, but maybe you haven't seen it exactly this way in the details.
Yeah. That's really cool. And it sounds like
well, let's hope so.
It sounds like the flair that you're describing is a very deep level kind of difference, and not just sort of here's what we see kind of stuff. That you're talking about a more comprehensive cultural realignment, which I think is awesome. So
yeah, and the book has, I mean, and not a lot of people are gonna get this, but the book has a lot of like now actually in it, like some of the decisions and some of the ways of thinking and stuff are I feel very Navajo, and so maybe that won't, maybe there'll just be a few readers that catch them, maybe most will, but that's okay. You know, you can read the book however you want. You know, once I'm done, it's up to the readers to decide what the book is. So, but yeah, I did try. It is more than just the surface difference. So.
Yeah, that sounds like it's really cool. Let's see, what else would we like to explore here? Are there let's see. So is the focus on the Navajo going to continue through all 4 of these books? Is the focus on the Navajo going to continue through all 4 of the books, and will any other indigenous groups be entering into the stories?
Great question. Actually, book 3 will be more Pueblo focused. So my and more Hispanic focused, actually. And by Hispanic, I mean the I guess the Hispanics of New Mexico. Like there's a culture, I don't know how many people are familiar with New Mexico, but there's a very specific Hispanic culture here that are descendants of the original Spanish conquest. I'm like invaders, but that's, I don't want to offend anyone, but we consider, you know, the Spanish invaders. And they're land grant, they're often land grant families. They have an old, you know, history here that goes back hundreds of years. And so I envision what's left of New Mexico in the wake of this apocalypse as breaking into these race-based city-states. And so I see places like Albuquerque becoming a place that's, you know, sort of like city-states of medieval Europe or Renaissance Europe, and these powerful Hispanic families ruling them. And so we're going to go there for a while. We're going to go play.
Interesting.
The Pueblo cultures have a huge influence. Well,
so are you going to deal with in the
my protagonist? But we're going to go see what's the.
Sorry, we lost touch with you there for a second.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, we didn't hear you for a minute. I didn't mean to talk over you, but we couldn't hear you. I was wondering if the Spanish in New Mexico, or if you're going to do like any of the penitente culture there and explore that.
Oh, you know, I haven't decided, but that is a thought. I have some of that in my family's background, so I don't know if I'm going to touch on that or not, but I might. I haven't written book 3 yet, so we'll see.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you write that in the chat bar for me, Cliff? So I know what you were saying. Like just the name of what the group you were talking about.
So is this oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if this is a world in which technology still functions, or how much of it is missing now because of the apocalypse, or is that a spoiler thing?
You know, technology is not big, no. You know, one of the things I really wanted to do was, if I'm on probably the majority of reservations, you're going to find out really quickly that technology is not what you think it is, I guess. So when I lived on the Navajo reservation, we did not have running water. And we home once a week or something. A lot of our electricity ran off the generator. We weren't on the grid. So, you know, of course, now they have internet because, you know, like through a satellite, but, you know, things that I think the majority of city dweller granted, or even, you know, more rural areas might take for granted, they don't exist now on the reservation. And so one of the things I wanted to focus on in the book was how these things that look like deficiencies or look like they would cause problems actually benefit the survivors of an apocalypse, because they're not as they don't rely on the technology as much. And they already know how to do things like hunt and grow their own food and live off the grid. Like those things are our place. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Just to turn for a moment to the Nebula winning piece. When I read Welcome to Your Authentic Indian Experience, it was really familiar because I've had that moment of, do I want to work at a, you know, plantation experience, and who would I have to be in order to do that, and how would that feel? And this is very, very close to that, and you do it beautifully.
Thank you.
It really evokes kind of that whole sort of struggle within yourself of, I would really like to pay rent and eat, but I don't necessarily want to sell my ethnicity and myself in order to do it.
Yeah.
How did you manage to come to expressing that so clearly?
Well, thank you. I'm glad I did express that clearly. You never know. You know, I think, you know, I know guys like the protagonist in that short story, like Jesse. I know guys like that live on the res that are, you know, 100% native, but they just want to get by. You know, they're just trying to make a buck. They're not real caught up in a lot of the trappings of what it is, or involved in the political conversations that you see on Twitter, or even issues that tend to like not interest them. And you know, for Jesse in that story, you know, his culture is a commodity that he's willing, you know, to sell to a certain degree, but he's not even sure what his culture is, right? So he's lost touch with yeah, I don't know. I think there's layers to that, you know, and one of the things I was trying to do was to show that conflict, but also to show how we're all sort of implicit or implicated.
Complicit?
In the selling of culture. Yeah, thank you. Complicit.
Yep.
In the selling of culture. That we all sort of have our fingers in it one way or the other, you know, and so there's a fine line, I think, between who the good guy is and the bad guy is, if there's good guys and bad guys at all, you know. Although I don't know, maybe White Wolf is clearly a bad guy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It would be interesting to see the sequel where White Wolf's family comes back and goes, no, this is not who you are. And he loses all of that as well. But that's only one way.
The twist in that story, and I think I can give this away because I think everybody's probably read it if they're going to read it by now, is that through the story itself is an authentic Indian experience, right?
Yeah.
So and that's why I wrote it in second person, because of the virtual reality idea that the reader themselves, I wanted to bring the reader into the story and have them become Jesse at all, right? You're the reader and you take on this persona and then you go through this experience. So
yeah, that was a good choice.
Yeah. Thank you. I was trying.
Well, you know, I always notice when a story's in second person, and I'm always looking for the reason why it's in second person, because there should always be a reason why. And then that just worked beautifully. So, well done.
In third person, it was just flat. It was not opening up. It just felt dull to me. And I had started reading The Tiger's Daughter. Is that the story I'm thinking of? The book? The one that's it's like an epistolatory set in like a secondary. Oh shoot! Yeah, I think it's The Tiger's Daughter in person. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, this is really sort of interesting. It inspired me to try that because I knew I was trying to go for a virtual reality experience, and I knew I wanted to do the story in a way that made them feel perhaps even a little restore the commodification of Native culture. Right. And second person just worked.
Yep.
Second person, and it went boom. You know, it flowered.
Good to know. Next time I'm stuck, I may try that. But it really did work.
Indeed.
Yeah. I'm now at the point, like, do I have to wait a week?
Oh, for the book? Yes.
Yeah. It makes me sad, but I'll be there a week from now. I will.
So if you don't mind me asking a quick question about the novel again, what is the significance of the title Trail of Lightning? If you don't mind going back to the novel for another second, can you talk a little bit about maybe the significance of the title Trail of Lightning? Or is that too spoilery?
Getting away. I guess I could tell you. Right. One of the learn is that the supernatural, and so one of the things that her and her partner Kai track are sun strikes. So they're literally following sort of a trail of light.
Oh, cool. I like the lightning on the cover. It works for me. So I'm ready to follow the trail.
Yeah, which is, how did you get so lucky to have such a cool cover?
I know, right? No, I did luck out. That's Tommy Arnold, and he just did a fabulous job. So, yeah. And we worked hard. The art director with my input on what the characters should look like and what the feel of me. I was like, no feathers, no braids, no buckskin. You know, rock and roll. That's what I want. So yeah.
Cool. It's great that they gave you input. That's kind of amazing, actually.
That's pretty rare.
Yeah, and honestly, it was really appropriate and important for them to do that for this book, I think, and especially because you're doing something that's so finely culturally tuned and so important that having that same fine cultural tuning and sensibility in the cover is, I think, really critical. So
yeah, absolutely, and I think they would agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, you know what? It's 4:45 and we've done a lot, but I know that you have to go early. So I'm thinking maybe I'll ask if there are any last thoughts or questions, and if not, then we'll wrap up. What do you think, folks?
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, there's obviously a lot of spoilery things that we can't dive into. But that's okay. The book is out next week. And so that will be awesome to see, and everybody go find it and read it.
Yes, and thank you so much for coming, because this is really important work.
Yes, thank you very much, Rebecca. I'm so glad that
thank you.
On the show. And I'm so glad that you have so many people wanting to talk to you and amplify your voice right now, because this is really fantastic. So
we're having a little squabble in my English.
You guys showed up.
A little squabble in my English department about who gets to teach it.
Oh, nice.
Let's fight over teaching your work. Sounds good.
I don't care if I'm the medievalist.
I'm the fan. Okay, well that's fantastic. So we will meet again next week for a topic, and I'm not sure what that will be yet because I lost my notes from last week, but that's okay. So I will be in touch via Facebook and Twitter, and Rebecca, anytime that you would like to stop by and participate in one of these shows, you are absolutely welcome. But I imagine you will be busy with publicity and stuff for your book for a while, so we'll be here if you ever feel like coming by for a visit.
Yes, please visit.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us about your work.
Yay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm going to stop the broadcast.